The belief of children in myths and fairy tales is the subject of our present-day presentation, and the comparison between the belief in myths of children and the belief in myths of premodern archaic adults. That is the subject. At first, I show you some of the articles I have published about the subject. The most important one is the article written in German, Theorie des Mythos, published in Anthropos. The three others are published in English and deal with several aspects of the belief in myths among pre-modern archaic people. The most strange article is that about the Dogon cosmology, philosophy before philosophy. This shows that the philosophy and mythology of archaic people surmount every expectation we have concerning their strange character and their irrational way of thinking. I strongly recommend these four articles. They show that it is impossible to develop ethnological theory without the application of child or developmental psychology. All articles show that developmental psychology is a basic discipline, the fundamental discipline, the foundation to any serious understanding of ethnological research. Children between their third and their 8th year of life in modern societies believe strongly in myths and fairy tales and are inclined to tell them and to listen to them. Myths and fairy tales are the most important, the most relevant kind of narration for the child's mind. They are eager to hear them, and they cannot hear them enough. And it is to them a kind of fascination and a kind of engagement that surmounts every other activity they are inclined to do except plays. They are engaged in listening myths more than to consume any other form of literature. Novels and documentaries are nothing for the mind of a child aged 3 to 8. Myths and fairy tales, that is their most beloved form of narration. Later on, when children surmount the age of 8 years, they are interested in adventure stories and later on in novels. So we have here a developmental path starting with myths, going over to adventurer stories, and then to novels with about 12 or 13 or 14 years of life. And this evolution of narratives reflects the mental growth taking place in the child between his 3rd and his 13th year of life. And we see already at that point the strong parallel to the history of literature in humankind's history, because we all know that the typical form of narration among archaic people, among nature peoples and ancient peoples are also the myths. When we ask children whether they take the myths for real or not, we will be surprised by the answers the children give. Of course, a child will not examine strictly whether the content of the myth happened once in time really or not. On the other hand, the child will never say that a myth tells only some kind of fiction, a story that did not take place once upon a time. A child will never say that the content of a myth is fictitious and irreal. When we observe the special attitude a child has towards a myth, we see that this attitude reflects a mentality that comes very close to an understanding of the content of the myth as an occurrence, as an incident that took place once upon a time. Children are very engaged in the story, and they react to the story as if the incident takes place not only once upon a time, but in the moment the child listens to the story. The child feels with the protagonist, with the persons who are suffering in the story, and they have pity with them, and they are their comrades, and they fear the evil persons in the story as if the evil persons were just before their eyes in the room where they listen to the story. So the children consume the story as if it would happen just in front of them, as if it would happen before their eyes, as if they would be participants of the story. So there is no difference between child and myth, a difference between the children in a situation and the content of the myth on the other hand. The child feels drawn into the story as if it would suffer and feel with those persons that are reported in the story. So when we say that the child takes a myth seriously, then we must always think about the understanding of reality in the mind of a child. It is a playful understanding of reality, but on the other hand, the child understands the play itself as a serious matter in life and does not discriminate play and reality, play and real occurrences. If it delves into a play, it is completely absorbed by the play and takes the play as a serious undertaking. And the same is true with the child's consumption of myth. It is engaged in the story and it feels the story as if it would report about a real incident or something that comes very close to a real incident. And if the child, or when the child does not discriminate strongly between story and reality, it also means that the child understands the reality different from our own understanding of reality. Because the children understand reality not in the strong way adults understand reality. So, children understand reality playful, and they understand the play as some kind of reality. So, the children do not discriminate much between reality and play, and do not discriminate much between a muse and a reportage, between a muse and a documentary, between the content of a muse and real occurrences they see in front of their eyes in reality. And that is the source of the fascination muse arouse in the mind of the child. Children do not ask themselves whether the content of the muse was real or irreal, because they tend to take the content of the muse as something that has taken place once upon a time, and as the children do not ask when exactly the content of the muse did take place and where the content of the muse had taken place. These evidences that they take the muse as something that takes place in a time you cannot grasp, in a time that can be days ago, weeks ago, some years ago, but it had taken place anywhere at any time, and you cannot seize exact the data where and when it took place. So the children have an understanding of reality that comes close to the stories narrated in the muse. Witchcraft and sorcery, magic and metamorphosis play an important part in the muse. The animistic view is vivid in the muse. Plants are talking to humans, rocks and stones are acting and are animate and conscious, and the whole nature corresponds to that what humans and animals are doing. Animals are persons, and ghosts and gods are present in the muse. So the muse has the same form of understanding reality as a child has without a perception of muse. When the child grows older, becomes 8 years of age, it surmounts a childlike understanding of muse. It surmounts the childish character of the muse. And they take muse as a boring stuff of narration. They are not interested anymore. Due to the grown understanding of reality, due to the grown intellectual capacities, the child does not interest anymore in muse. Many mythologists, many famous mythologists hint at the parallels between the muse for children and the muse of the ancient world. Wilhelm Wundt, Wilhelm Leiblin, and Joseph Campbell were among those mythologists who draw the attention to these parallels. But they went further, especially Wilhelm Wundt, in his folk psychology, explained that there is no difference between archaic myths and children's myths. Not maintaining that the children's myths are the source and the origin of the archaic myths, but pointing out that the source is the same. Whether you say that the child's myth was the origin of the archaic myth, or you say the archaic myth was the origin of the child's myth, that makes no difference. That makes no point, because they have the same character and the same nature. And this means that the psychology behind must have been the same. The identity between the child's myth and the archaic myth hints at the point that there was no psychological difference concerning the origin of the myth, the both types of myth, and concerning the reception of the myth. And therefore, the identity between these two kinds of myths is a clear evidence of the childlike anthropological stage of premodern humankind. As there is no difference between the two kinds of myths, archaic human being must have had the same kind of reception of myths and must have had the same kind of creation, invention of the myth. And that is the reason why archaic or premodern humankind had as first form of narration the myth. Before humankind developed adventure stories or novels, they only had the myth as a single kind of narration. And that has a strict parallel to the development of the child, because the very young child has as the only form of narration the myth. And humankind went through the same stages, from the Stone Ages to the advent of the early modern times. The populace, the peoples of the world, were engaged in listening to myths and to nothing else. And therefore, the history of literature reflects the psychogenetic development of humankind from the pre-operational stage to higher stages, and that the ancient humankind stood mainly on the pre-operational stage and had the psychology of a child. And therefore you see that ancient or archaic myths have the same traits as the myths of the child. So the stories are very easily constructed. There is a clear discrimination between good and evil. And the characters are sharply painted. The good persons are only good. The evil persons are only evil. Animals can speak. Plants and rocks can speak. Metamorphosis takes a great place in ancient myths. The belief in magic is an overarching principle in all kinds of ancient myths. And ethnologists who have studied the reception of myths in archaic people have also hint at the parallels to the child's understanding of myths, because archaic people take the myths as some kind of reportages, as some kind of documentaries, in the same way as a child does. Usually, ancient people have a playful understanding of reality, but they understand myths as reporting about real occurrences that have taken place once upon a time, anywhere at any time, without that ancient or archaic people would try to examine exactly, without that archaic people would make a sharp difference between fiction and reportage. But it is clear that they never understand myth as only a form of fictional narration. They don't see myth that way as modern human beings do, when they make a sharp difference between novels on the one side and documentaries and reportages on the other side. The archaic people does not make this discrimination, as a child doesn't do this. The archaic human being takes a myth as a true story as he is able to understand truth. And archaic people explain the world by myths. Their myths have explanatory character according to that what archaic people understand under explanation, under explanatory theories. As they have no sciences, as they have no rational understandings and rational explanations to the existence of phenomena, they understand the myths as the stories that explain to them how things came into being and how things have to be understood. It is the same way as a child takes a myth as explaining to them the coming into existence of that or this object. So the myth has a place in the mind of the child and archaic human being that have sciences in the more developed brain of the adult staying on the adolescent stage of formal operations. And therefore, when the archaic human being wants to know how the sum came into being, how the world came into being, how the human beings came into existence, how this or that artifact originated, how this or that wood or river came into being, they ask the myth. And the myth tells them how the things in the world came into being and how we have to explain their existence, their form, and their special characteristics. I will tell some myths to explain this special character. In South Africa, there is a myth how the hippopotamus got its nature. The myth tells that once upon a time there was a fire that burned the fur of the hippopotamus. The hippopotamus went into the river, into the water, to extinguish the fire. But it had lost already its fur, and therefore the hippopotamus of today has no fur anymore. And the fire explains also why the hippopotamus likes to live in the water and likes to stay in the water. So the myth explains how the hippopotamus got its physical appearance and how the hippopotamus developed its way of life, his special traits. It is an occurrence that happened once upon a time, an incident that happened to one individual or to a few individuals. And this occurrence that changed the form of the hippopotamus was inherited by all other descendants of that hippopotamus that experienced this special incident. And you see at once, whoever believes that the hippopotamus has its way of life and its physical appearance inherited from such an occurrence must have the reality sense and the judgment ability of a child, of a preschool child, of a child aged 3 to 6. It is impossible that a child, a modern child, aged 10 years, could ever believe in such a strange story, could ever believe that this story could explain the behavior and the physical appearance of the hippopotamus. Only a psychological stage of a child aged 3 to 6 can believe such a story. But we know from mythologists and ethnologists that archaic people take this myth as a full explanation and that they really believe in the reality of that story, that they really believe that once upon a time this occurrence had taken place and explained the physical appearance and the way of life of hippopotamus. And so we see again that the belief in myth is a full empirical evidence and proof of the childlike anthropological stage of archaic humankind. Then all myths told around the world, from the Stone Ages up to the advent of early modern times, has this special character, reflects this kind of understanding reality, reflects this level of judgment ability. The myths around the world share this childish character without any exception. Let's take another myth. It is told around the world at several places how the raven got its black feathers. It is told in several ways. One way is that as the gods created the raven, they asked the birds what kind of color they would select for their feathers. And the raven um, could not agree which color they would prefer. Therefore, the gods punished the ravens by painting them dark and black. And that is the reason why the ravens have by today black feathers. And again, whoever believes in such a story has a childlike attitude and the childlike anthropological stage of a child aged 3 to 6. It is impossible that a modern child aged 10 years of age could ever believe in such a story, because the child in modern society, aged 10, have a sense of reality and a judgment ability that surmounts that level that has created origin and reception of such a muse. But we know from ancient peoples that they really believed in the truth of that muse, that they really believed that this occurrence explains the appearance of the raven. Or let's take another muse told by Radcliffe Brown in his amazing book about the Andaman Islanders, written in or published in 1932 and basing on a manuscript of 1908. The Andaman Islanders explain the change of day and night by the magic made by cicadas. It happens on the Andaman Islands that the species of cicada living there make strong sounds, especially at dawn and dusk. And therefore, the islanders believe that it is the songs of the cicada that creates dawn and dusk, creates day and night. The association in time between the songs of cicada on the one hand and dusk and dawn on the other hand is understood by them as cicadas being the makers of day and night. And then they ask themselves, why do the cicadas make this noise only at these 2 points of the day? And then the islanders say, night is not good for humans. And therefore, the cicadas make the night to punish the humans. Therefore, the humans must have done a misdeed, a crime, once upon a time. And therefore they say, in the early days of the world, humans must have crashed, must have killed a cicada, and therefore the cicadas decided to punish the humans and all descendants of humans throughout time. And therefore the cicadas make every day the night to punish the humans for that, what one of their members had done in the early beginnings of the cosmos. And this implies that the Andaman Islanders see the cicadas as some kind of gods equipped with supranational magical power, being capable of creating the night. And that this belief is not only a fanciful story to entertain people, but that this myth has explanatory power can be seen from the consequences the Andaman Islanders draw. Because it's a time when the cicadas sing, every noise in the camps is forbidden. People are exposed to keep calm in their houses and camps, and if they make some noise, they are punished by their neighbors. And there are strong rituals to keep this rule alive and to observe all norms that are following from the understanding of cicadas as divine and holy beings. And again, what we can see from this myth is that only a preschool child aged 3, 4, 5 years can believe in such a story and can take it for granted that the cicadas are the makers of day and night. A modern child aged 10 years could never believe in such a story, but we can see from the consequences the Andaman Islanders draw from the story that they take this story as a real and as a full explanation to the daily changes of light. And Radcliffe Brown studied the reception of the myth among the Andaman Islanders and came to the conclusion that they really believe that this myth delivers a full explanation to them how the daily changes came into being and how they have to be explained. And what we see now is, again, that the origin and the reception of the myth is a full empirical proof of the childlike anthropological stage of premodern and archaic humankind. And all ethnologists who studied reception of myths in archaic peoples, may it be Bronislaw Malinowski, may it be Reo Fortune or Radcliffe Brown, they all come to the same conclusion that these people believe in the truth of their myths seriously, especially the holy myths are taken as more real and more serious than every reportage or every documentary. And what we have also to add is that religious myths are seen as holy stories whose truth is beyond the slightest doubt in the minds of archaic people. What the archaic or premodern people know from their gods and divinities is pointed out and described in the myth. The gods are real because the myths are taken as real stories. What the people know from their gods is reported in the myth. And as gods are real persons, The myths are real stories in the mind of these people. The truth of religion is laid down in the truth of the myths. And what we see now is that in the history of humankind, the myth of the character of the hippopotamus myth, the raven myth, and the cicada myth, that this kind of myth pervaded human society up to the advent of modern times, and that the common people, even in early modern times, believe in the truth of such myths. It is clear that nature people have a stronger adherence to myths of this primitive level than educated people in ancient Greek-Roman society or in scientific circles of the 17th century. It is clear that these intellectual elites, as they stood on the concrete operational stage and had the mindset of children aged 10 years of age or so, that these people did not believe anymore so easily in such simple stories. But greater percentages of people, even in Europe of the 18th century, stood on anthropological stages, inclined to believe in such childish stories. You can see it when you consider that the normal people of the 19th century in Europe believed, for example, in the Bible stories where it is told how God created the animals. And the way in the Genesis, how God created the animals, has the character of the cicada mythos or of the raven myth. And therefore, as a great percentage of people believed that the animals came into being in the way the Bible tells, is a clear empirical indicator that the inclination to believe in such simple stories was widespread among common people even in the 19th century. And the history of literature has gone the same way as it does in the modern child. The simple myths were replaced by novels, and the novel bases on the strict discrimination between reality and fiction. Every reader of a novel knows of the fictional character of the novel. There's not one reader of a novel who takes the content of the story as a reportage on a true incident, and that discriminates the reception of a novel from the reception of a myth, both in the child and in archaic human being. But the history does not only go from myth to novel, it also goes the way from myth to philosophy and from myth to sciences. Philosophy was born in myth, as the philologists tell us, and the sciences originated also in myth, or the sciences are the descendants of myth. But both Philosophy and sciences reflect higher stages of mind than the muse does. Philosophy, and especially sciences, are manifestations of higher psychological stages than the muse does. And so we see a strong parallel to ontogenetic developments, because the child in our society goes from muse over novels to sciences in the second decade of life, when it studies at school physics, chemistry, mathematics, history, geology, geography, and so on.